Hi, welcome to my next video. This time I wanted to show you a test that I did recently of painting with waterproof inks. I will be doing this picture with only 3 inks that I recently got for Christmas, yay! And I have here the 3 base color set, so red, blue and yellow, and I also got some clear solution. If I wanted to use these inks in my fountain pen, for example, I could dilute my color to make it paler. But today I will use the inks straight from the bottles. I'll just shake them first because these are pigment inks. These inks are made by a company called Inkstand, which is located in Kuramae in Tokyo, actually in walking distance from our home. And they sell all kinds of pigment waterproof inks that you can mix there and make your own color, or buy some base colors and then mix your own colors at home. Very nice place that I would recommend you to visit if you are in Tokyo anytime. Okay, so first I wanted to check how the inks actually look like unmixed. So I did some swatches here using the undiluted ink and then just adding some water to it. And as you can see, all the colors are really strong, even though the yellow is not so saturated, but they behave a bit better when diluted with water. I think the colors have somehow more light in them when they are diluted. Maybe it's because these inks are made to be used in fountain pens rather than to be painted with a brush. It was the same case with the test mixes that I did, even on heavy watercolor paper. When I tried to use the inks just straight undiluted, the mixes were heavy and kind of uninteresting, but when I added some water, the light appeared again, and I actually managed to do some greens and some violets and also some neutral tones also, even though the results were not so saturated as I would like them to be. Okay, so now that I knew what colors I can get from these 3 inks, I searched for something that will be suitable to paint with these colors. Of course, I could just pick anything and then try to represent it with the colors that I have, but I tried to play to the colors' strengths, so I chose an interior piece with a lot of orange, yellows and neutral tones, just a bit of green outside the windows, like some trees there. But of course the picture that I had was just of an empty Japanese style room. It was nicely lit with warm late afternoon light, but the room was empty, so I had to figure out what to put in it by myself. I wanted to put some nice furniture to make it kind of a cozy scene, but also wanted a strong blue accent so I can use the undiluted blue ink to its strength. I decided to put a low table with some tea paraphernalia on it. In the back, a cabinet with records and a record player. And in the front, a hibachi, so this is a big ceramic bowl full of ash, and on it you make charcoal fire to, for example, boil water. So I also added a heavy looking iron kettle on it. I added some zabuton cushions, so the low cushions that you sit on, and some empty cups there just on coasters on the floor. I wanted to imagine a scene how the room would look like if the people who were just enjoying the tea, sitting there on the floor and watching the trees outside, just went somewhere for a second and we see the room empty. After I finished the first thumbnail and decided what I want in the room, I did this second bigger drawing to just lock down all the details. The next step was to just do the line work on watercolor paper. I did a faint, really faint underdrawing first, and then used a Blackwing pencil to do the lines. I was pressing a bit harder than usual on the pencil because I wanted the lines to be nice and sharp and black even on this kind of rough watercolor paper. I'm using here really heavy arcs, watercolor paper. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm using it here because I used it with this type of inks before, so I know that it will work okay. Sadly, on some watercolor papers, even the better ones, if you use the inks straight and undiluted to get some heavy colors, the inks kind of go into the fibers of the paper and make darker, duller blotches in the wash. I'm sure that you saw something like this when using watercolors on paper that's not really meant for watercolors, and these blotches don't go away even after the ink has dried up. So these inks can be a bit choosy about what type of paper they will work well with. Anyway, what exactly is so special about these inks? As I said in the beginning, these inks are sold as mixable inks for fountain pens, but because they are just usual pigment inks, you can use them for painting too. The most important thing about them is that even though they behave more or less like watercolors, after the ink dries, it's waterproof, and it's really waterproof. This allows us to do two things that we cannot do with only watercolors. First, you can mix almost any color of ink you want and then put that mix into a fountain pen. Then you can draw waterproof line work to be used with watercolors or colored inks or any other media. If you use tools like a nib pen or a glass pen or a really fine brush, you can even give different parts of your picture different colored waterproof lines, which is awesome. This use, however, has a downside because these inks are, again, waterproof. If the ink dries in your fountain pen, it's really hard to get it out. So it's easy to break your fountain pen if you forget, for example, to take the ink out and don't use the pen for a long time. You can use a special pen like the Indigraph that I was testing on my channel, or any pen that can be, for example, taken apart easily. But you have to remember about that, and these inks are high maintenance if you want to use them in a fountain pen. So that's a minus. Okay, so the second thing that we can do with these inks is layering, for example, shadows on things that are already painted in the picture. You can see me in the video layering a shadow, a dark orange shadow on things that are already painted there. If these were watercolors, the dark details that are already painted there would bleed and kind of blur, and the paint would mix, especially if the used paper and watercolor combination allows for easy paint lifting. If we put a wet shadow layer on some dark details, everything will turn into kind of a mud. But with waterproof inks, I can paint sharp, even dark details, and then cover this part whole with a nice shadow. It's easier to make the whole part of the picture consistent, and the effect is similar to using an airbrush, which is really nice actually. The fact that the inks are waterproof when dry make the order of painting that you have to follow less strict. So the whole painting process is a bit more free and fun. I can paint dark elements and then paint light washes over it or next to it, and I don't have to be worried that stuff will bleed into each other and the paint will mix. So the whole process is a bit more natural. But of course, this also has a downside because the ink is waterproof. Once you paint something, you cannot just take it away. With watercolors, there is a chance of like scrubbing the paint out and using water or some towels to take the excess paint away, which sometimes allows for some corrections, but with waterproof inks, you're stuck with what you did. So there's no going back, even more than with regular watercolors. Also, of course, these are liquid inks, so the use is a bit more complicated than with just regular watercolors. With watercolors, you just have your half pans, and if you don't want really, you can get away without even cleaning your palette between your pieces. You can just leave your watercolors there and they'll be okay. But with inks, You have to clean your small dishes. The water from the ink evaporates, so they get kind of thick after some time. It's also harder to clean your palette when the ink dries on it. The process is also a bit more wasteful because sometimes you end up with leftover ink in the palette and you cannot just put it back away because it's a bit contaminated with different colors, because it's harder to just pick ink and be perfect about not introducing other colors to the ink that you have on the palette and so on. With watercolors you can just scrub the half pan with a clean brush and it's okay, but with ink you have to throw this leftover part away, so it's a bit more wasteful also. I found that it's more difficult for me to mix the colors and keep the mixes consistent and nice and pure. That's also something I have to get used to, I guess. Maybe it's different if you are using only like pre-mixed colors, so you prepare some mixes and then just use them like you would use color markers. But if you want to mix colors live like you would with watercolors, it's a bit difficult. Okay. Overall, I really enjoyed using these inks. I only used 3 colors here, but I already ordered more. Yeah, so my collection of waterproof inks is getting bigger and bigger. This is how the picture turned out. I really like the shadow effects, which really look like I was using an airbrush for making deeper shadows in the corners of the room. This is something that I think, if used correctly, can give a more photorealistic look to a picture, which is a very interesting thing for me. So I certainly want to explore painting with waterproof inks more. By the way, I'm using here the inkstand inks only because they are easy for me to get. I bet you can find other waterproof color inks close to you too. Okay, that's it for this video. This is the last video of 2020. I wish you a creatively and overall excellent year of 2021. As always, feel free to comment, share and subscribe, and you can also support me on Patreon. It's thanks to your continued awesome support there that I'm able to do these kind of videos and my other projects. Thank you very much. Okay, that's it for this video. See you in the next one. Bye.